Well, our chapel speaker today is Dr. Ober, and coached for his first CSU volleyball win last night. Congratulations to all you guys. I said earlier I was really expecting to see you shaved this morning, but it's going to be okay. It's fine. So, in case you didn't know, Dr. Ober is a professor. He's the chair of our business administration department here at the school, and he is our interim volleyball coach also. Little bio fact: he just celebrated 28 years of marriage with his wife Bonnie. I think Bonnie is here someplace, but I won't embarrass her by making her stand up. And you have 2 married daughters. Wedding pictures were cool. A professional life. Before Dr. Ober became a professor here, he was involved in business in a variety of places. He is a researcher. He is an author, focusing on retail sales, where a lot of folks make their money, and also on leadership in the retail world. He's president emeritus of the trade organization for outlet retail, international outlet retail. He served as a trustee for a seminary down south in Pennsylvania, Evangelical Seminary, and served as director of the Pennsylvania Retailers Association and also the Pennsylvania Dutch Convention and Visitors Bureau. All of that, step at a time. You may not tell the story, but I would venture that when you were 18 years old, that not all of that was on your list, and God walked you all the way through it. It's a cool thing. Got inducted into the Outlet Retail Hall of Fame in 2010. So we're glad you're here. Doc, come on up on the stage and open your heart to us. Thank you.
God has uniquely gifted each person with the ability to create, to make something out of nothing, to add value to the ordinary, to generate beauty from bareness. It's how we're designed because we share the DNA of our Creator. God grants us tools and abilities. He infuses us with passion and leads us with purpose. What we do with what we've been given is up to us. The Bible tells us that those who are faithful with little will be entrusted with much. Whether we have been given a hammer, a paintbrush, or a sum of money, we each hold potential to do something great. A masterpiece awaits. What will you create?
If you just bear with me a little bit till the video's off. Bernie Boswick is going to be speaking today to all the business students that want to come at 11 o'clock in, I believe it's room 224. Bernie's the president of Ambassador Advisors, and go there, you'll get to hear about how his company manages over $700 million in assets. And then he's going to join us for lunch. If you'd like to have lunch with him in the cafeteria today at 12 o'clock, he and his portfolio manager, Matthew Merlot, not Merlot, or Merlot if you're French Canadian, but a Merlot. He will be speaking at 1 o'clock to the investment management students. And again, the entire campus, staff, faculty, if you're interested in how to invest, come to these. These will be great opportunities. We're very thankful that they're here. So, last night, great victory with the girl volleyball players. Stand up. They had their first tremendous win. Come on, Katie, stand. Look, the freshmen stand up. Come on, give a big round of applause. Yeah, look at that. So a guy stood up. Well, that's interesting. Hopefully someday there'll be a guys volleyball team, all in the Lord's hands. And then, you might not know this, but we actually compete in a national competition, national investment team. We have actually 2 teams this year. They'll be competing against, I think it's 600 universities around the world. They'll be handed $500,000 to invest in the markets beginning October 1, running through October 31st. If they win the whole thing, they get some money, which is nice. And they probably will have a jet flying here offering them a job so they can make their $6 to $7 million in a few years. So they're that hot. One of the groups, the other team is called the 2M, meaning $2 million gang, the 2M gang. They're also the other team competing. So if you see those guys, it's exciting. So to get started, today I'm going to focus on 3 questions. Earlier today, I realized I am not a pastor. I am not a missionary. I have never been really a youth pastor. And it's a scary place to stand on this stage. I'm telling you, when the dean of the seminary speaks the day before you speak on the book of Psalms, that's a big book. I realize I'm in trouble. I'm a marketing researcher. I have been reporting for many, many years as a contributor to the Beige Book, which is put together 8 times a year for the Federal Reserve governors to decide whether interest rates should go up or down. And my specialty is retail, specifically grandparent spend. Think about that, grandparent spend. And it makes a lot of decisions. It affects how much interest rate you pay on that credit card that you have. Grandparent spend is important since your generation is the only generation that's ever existed in the United States that since you've been born until just a few weeks ago, the only generation that the country's been at war your entire life. There's no other generation like you. We don't have that. As marketers, we don't know how to relate because we have nothing to compare. So you are amazingly unique. The unique part is, at the same time as this Saturday, as we celebrate 9/11 or mourn or weep about 9/11, you have no memories because many of you weren't even born. And if you were born, you were only probably a year or 2 old. There's going to be a lot of people with really bad thoughts and bad memories coming up. If you want to pray for people, there's a lot of wounded people from 9/11, a lot of wounded soldiers. There's broken hearts everywhere. There's a lot of bad thoughts. This whole movement looking at mindfulness has been very much utilized in athletics. So we're going to start this off. So if you've never had a negative thought, we'd like you to sit up front. Come on up if you've never had. No one? Anybody? So stand up if you've ever had a negative thought. Stand up if you ever had a negative thought. Probably realistic. Now sit down if you've had negative thoughts, but you've never also had positive thoughts. Sit down. Very few. Do you realize that you are part of 82% of the world's population every day has negative thoughts? Every day. All I want to tell you is they are not real. They're just negative thoughts. So something to consider. Go ahead, sit down. All right? Those 3 seats are still empty. But hey, negative thoughts. So I coach a 12U national team over the years, and they have lots of negative thoughts. And they like to sing to everything. So some of them, I've asked them to take their negative thoughts and put it to music. And so that was a crazy thought because that night I just got overwhelmed by all these little video songs of my 12U players telling me about how red-faced, they hate the fact they're so scared when they play volleyball that their face is going to turn bright red and everybody's going to laugh at them. And I share my negative thoughts. Well, someday I'll be fully bald as a negative thought. But they're still negative thoughts, right? Not real. But all of a sudden they put them to music, and guess what? All of a sudden they're starting to control their negative thoughts. Just take your negative thoughts and name them. I have a lot of those. They changed from, as Dr. Lytle mentioned, from my time I was 18. Probably my first negative thought was, well, nobody will ever accept my ask to go out on a date. I had that for a long time. Probably took me maybe about 7 days to get over that when I was a freshman in college. But hey, they're negative thoughts. But put names to things. So if you have a negative thought that you regularly have, which you probably do every day, put a name to it. Start owning them. And then at some point, you can just start laughing at them. So my 12U national team, they have this thing when they're getting down and they're starting to think negative. The captain of the team usually yells out this word, banana, and they all just start laughing on the court. It's really wild when you're down by 5 points and you start laughing and you're the losing team, the effect it has on the other team. Last night, we actually had a play called Banana. I actually don't know if we ever played it. I didn't hear it because across the Penn State team from Hazleton never laughed. So Ella, did you not say banana? All right, we'll keep going. So the first question, so I'm thinking about this. Many years ago, I went to see my doctor, a guy named Dr. Miles Newman. His brother was the head commander of the last naval ship off the coast of Iraq. A brilliant doctor, studied at Hopkins, and I went in to get a checkup, and he told me, you need to be a wrestling coach for the local little boys. And it was tough to say no to Dr. Newman, so I did that. But I didn't understand what that meant. So I was at least given the freedom to have, halfway through every practice, a devotional. So I was trying to figure out how to be a wrestling coach and also blend in my faith. And I knew I was in trouble, so I called my ex-college coach, Pete Wilson. And Pete happened to be the captain of the wrestling team when this guy named Jim Elliott, if you ever heard of him, he was massacred by the Auca Indians. Jim Elliott, at age 19, said, "No fool is the man who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." Right? At 19. No man is a fool who will give up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. So I just called Pete and I said, Pete, he lived out in Wheaton, Illinois, and I said, Pete, I need help. I don't know how to do this. I was a history major, and I don't remember any of my Bible classes, which he knew because when I was in college, all I cared about was staying eligible to wrestle and girls, and I openly admit that. So Pete said, I'll be right there. I'm like, you're going to be right there? He actually literally got in his car, my wife will tell you, drove all the way in from Wheaton, and for 5 days in a row, he ran our little wrestling program. And he had the first emotion, and this is what he asked: why did God give you parents? I never thought much about that. I didn't like my parents. I admit that. My dad was a Marine jet fighter pilot. You had to look up to him because he was a great pilot. He was one of the first Marine jet pilots that broke the sound barrier. He's a member of the NCAA Wrestling Hall of Fame, the United States Wrestling Museum, the PIAA Wrestling Hall of Fame, Athletic Hall of Fame, every Hall of Fame my dad's been in. And I hate going to celebrations that celebrate my dad. And I'll admit that. The reason for that is my dad really loved to put his fist in my face. So I decided on my own I needed to go to church. I don't know if I really knew what church was about. I just knew I needed a moment of safety, just a moment. And I remember it was always scary when my dad would bring me to the church, especially youth group meetings, because I never knew what condition I would be when I went home. See, my dad was the athletic director at Elizabethtown College, so he had access to everything in the trainer room to make sure that I looked a lot better than I really was when I got home. So I remember when he looked at me one time after youth group, and he said, "Why don't you have a coat on?" And I didn't answer fast enough, and next thing you know, I got the punch in the face, my hands were filling up with blood, and I didn't know why. Why did God give me this parent? I didn't know. So I know that some of you are just like me. You might not even have parents. They might not even be around. And you ask this question, why did God give you parents? Well, Pete's answer was to teach us how to obey. So think about that. So we're a lot of 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds learning how to wrestle, and God gave you parents to teach you how to obey. I was so glad he was doing that talk, because I don't know if I would have answered it. But it made sense to the little boys that were wrestling, because he said, hey, God taught you how to obey, because if you don't know how to obey, you can't be successful at anything. You can't be successful at a sport. You'll never play, we're from Philadelphia Eagle area, you could ever be an Eagle. You could never, because you wouldn't be able to follow the plays. Even our crazy quarterback that we currently have in our wide receivers, they've got to run a play a certain direction to be successful. We're on the volleyball team trying to run plays so we can be successful. But you have to learn how to obey. Sometimes learning how to obey is very painful. Henry Nouwen, a great writer, said this: God is a God of the present and reveals to those who are willing to listen carefully to the moment in which they live the steps they are to take towards the future. Do not worry about tomorrow, Jesus says. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Matthew 6:34. Tough one as a business professor when we're many of you come to me talking about your careers and what your future is, and trying to align that with my walk with Christ, realizing, don't worry about tomorrow. But we have a match on Saturday. Don't worry about Saturday. But we'll get there, right? Your faith. Because why? Even when we are not faithful, as it says, I think I'm not a Bible guy, so remember. So even when we are not faithful, God is faithful. Many of you already know what that verse is, so I won't spend the time looking for it. But God is always faithful. That's the toughest thing for little children, especially if mom isn't there or dad isn't there. My dad was raised by a single mom. I have over the years have come to deal with some of his issues. Not meaning that if you're raised by a single mom that things will be abusive in your families, but also have a heart when you hear you have a friend who was raised by a single mom. A tough place. My grandmother was 6'1". She was a tough Pennsylvania Dutch lady, but she spent her whole life sewing soles on the bottom of children's shoes at Gerbert Payne in Mount Joy. The factory's still there, though it no longer makes shoes. But what have you learned about how to obey? Did you learn about that? Is being obedient an important thing in your life? I truly believe that if you are obedient to God, your prayer life will completely change if you're obedient to God. I really believe if you don't have a faithful prayer life, I would say that you probably are not obedient to God, that you aren't being faithful. He'll still be faithful to you. His love never wears out. But just think about that. So if you're wondering why you're struggling maybe in your prayer life, just think about that. Maybe you're not obedient. I'm not judging you on that, but think about it. Man, Jesus Christ asked so many questions. If you ever had the opportunity, Tenny, who was a faculty member, actually took one of his classes. Scary thing to take classes from Bible authors, especially on the subject that they wrote on. But he wrote a great book talking about the 12 questions that Jesus asked. Look at that book sometime. It's probably written a long time, even before maybe your parents were born. But look at it, the 12 questions that Jesus asked. Maybe you'll ask those questions. So to teach others, you have to obey, right? You got to obey what the syllabus says. You got to follow those things. But as you look through this and you decide your next question, I got to click this, is a question of so what? That's part of my life as a marketing guy. I tell the students when you write these press releases, if the response of other people is so what, you really aren't there. You really got to get your target. You got to really focus to make it interesting for there to be a reason for anybody to participate, to even anyone to care. Now, if you're a follower of Christ, your so what is Christ, is the fact that his redemption, is that so many people are out there with such negative thoughts, they're crying out for somebody to give them peace. Anxiety levels are at their greatest right now, and partly, I think, is nobody knows what to rely on. The world itself has kind of turned its back on many things religious. I know in our research, the fastest growing religious group are the non-religious, the NRs. That's the greatest growing group. And why? I mean, we might argue there's a lot of different reasons why that's happening. I would just tell is that sometimes we forget that being a follower of Christ is just Christ. It's just Christ. That simple thing that happened when you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, didn't need to be spectacular. Think about it. The 3 temptations that Satan, the questions he asked. What was the first one? He wanted you to consider whether ask God to be relevant. Just turn the rocks into bread. And what was Christ's response? One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Are you living on God's word? That's life. It isn't necessarily relevant, right? It's not exciting enough for people to stay awake even in chapel, right? Because people have decided that it's not relevant, and they want relevant. The other temptation that Christ faced was to be spectacular. The so what question is a little bit about that. Why should I listen? Why does it matter? And you need to have an answer for that. You need to have an answer for questions. But remember, fame is perishable. Power sacrifices time, friends, property, and integrity. In fact, I truly believe this is the great risk within the church today, is the church is seeking power. And they don't even know how to quite do it well. Years ago, I had the opportunity to be a campaign director to knock off a 18-year incumbent, the third highest ranking Republican in Pennsylvania. And I was actually supporting a Republican candidate, so it wasn't that I was a Democrat. There's no problems being a Democrat. But when they go down, they can go down in flames. That's how quick politicians, how long do some of these guys really last? I'm laughing about how many people at the end of the last presidency received the last day, they got assignments in all of these positions in the government. And they're surprised that they're being let go today. And you say, well, that's a power thing. But I also think power is so tied to money, it's scary to me. So what? If somebody looked at your life, would they say that? So what? I struggled with this one. My whole life have been in the Jewish community. In retail, I was always told that you'll be part of the family. I would tell my Jewish friends I never knew adoption took so long, because I never was. I would get invited to my Jewish friends, and many of them, not my best Jewish friends, but many of them, while they were there, they thought, oh, we got this Christian guy. We'll let him dirty his hands and clean the filter out. We'll give him a good meal, but we'll have him clean out the filters in the air conditioners or change the water filters. So in one way, you want to be able to know that you can take your life into another world and have an impact. How many of you are brokenhearted for the 300 orphans that disappeared 2 weeks ago from a Christian orphanage in Afghanistan? Do you care for them? Do you think if they get saved all of a sudden and they get rescued, somebody might say, wow, that was more than so what? But think about your life. How do people look at you? Not in how you stand out as a basketball player or a volleyball player or how smart you are, but whether you love Christ. Because that's where it gets tough, because things come in your life and you get really excited. So this summer, I had the opportunity within a 60-day period to have both of my daughters get married. This is my oldest daughter. She is a captain in the Marine, not in the Marine, sorry, man, I'm in trouble now. She's a captain in the Army, all right? 60 days later, my youngest daughter got married. They're all smiling and the old guy still looks the same. But hey, 60 days, I had a plan. I had a big plan. I had to walk my daughters down the aisle. It was the most important thing in my life. And in one way, I thought by walking them down the aisle, I would show them that I love them. So I had this great plan. So for some stupid reason, we'll say it was God's blessing, the day before my oldest daughter's wedding, I went in to just have a checkup. And the same PA walked in and said, hey, Dr. Ober, how's it going? How's your daughter's wedding? And because she had her wedding, because of COVID, changed 3 different dates. So she was really tracking how my daughter was doing. At one time, we actually had 2 full reception dinners paid for because But one that was supposed to have 225 went down to 25. We finally found a place that would do 110, and then our church decided we could finally have 110 people. Interesting. But the day before, I go into the doc, and the PA says, can I have somebody come in? We just want to check something in your leg. And I'm like, okay. So they brought this ultrasound person. She came in. She did the ultrasound on my left leg, and she left. And next thing you know, in comes the surgical nurse, the vascular surgeon, the PA, and the person that first talked to me. 2 of the 3 late nurses coming in are crying. It is not a good scene when they're crying, because they knew I was so excited about the next day to walk Cecily down the aisle. And they knew in their mind it had ended, because what they had done, they had already scheduled emergency vascular surgery, because I didn't know I had no blood flow below my left knee. I couldn't feel it. Thank goodness God doesn't put nerves in our arteries, so I couldn't feel it. I didn't even know I was in trouble. What a fool, right, in life. Didn't even know I was in trouble. And so they say, we need you to go right over and draw blood. And I'm still trying to absorb this. And I go get the blood drawn. I call, actually, sadly, I'll admit this, I called my best friend and said, I don't know what to do. I got to walk Cecily down the aisle. And he said, well, you got to call your wife. So I called my wife, and she said, well, you got to tell Cecily, our daughter. Now, my daughter's an MD, so this is all kind of interesting, but I was supposed to take pictures of the bridesmaid luncheon. These are the things, guys, that happen in these weddings. You'd be amazed, all the side activities. It's crazy. Also why I believe in pre-engagement counseling, not premarital counseling. But we can talk about that if you would like that insight. So in that way, I went over there, was supposed to take pictures of the bridesmaid luncheon. I said, Cecily, can I talk to you? And I saw the critical care doctor that she is. That's how she treated me. I told her. She didn't crack a smile or a frown. She said, thanks, Dad. We'll keep this secret. And she went over and had her luncheon with her bridesmaids. And so I made the decision not to have the surgery. Even though the doctor said you might not live through the weekend and you might and probably will lose your leg, it was more important to me to do that. I'm not even saying that's close to the sacrifice that our Lord did for us, but I wanted them to know how much I loved her. I never told anyone. Even my brother, who's a trauma PA, I only told him at the end of the reception. He dropped to his knee, went and filled the blood flow in the bottom of my ankle, and he looked up at me gray and said, there's no blood flow. I'm like, that's what I was saying. So went in on Monday, and guess what? It was worse than they ever thought. They had to pull out, and then they had to schedule a full-blown vascular surgery. They took 2 veins out of my right arm and replaced the arteries in my left leg. Awful stuff. Awful stuff. But I had another plan. I had another daughter getting married in 60 days. Now I had to learn how to walk again. All right? That was this summer. When you have a goal in your life, whether it's to serve the Lord in Afghanistan or Pakistan or Europe or downtown Scranton, you've got to make that decision of what really matters to you. Whether my daughters in the long term understand what that meant, that sacrifice of going to physical therapy and having people move your leg in different ways so that you could walk and even stand here today, all I can say to you is focus on these questions. Do you love me? This should break your heart. I think about this all the time. I drive a lot. I actually live down in Elizabethtown in Lancaster County, so my wife actually has driven the last week or so back and forth about 7 times, but I drive back there. I have a lot of free time, and I ask this question, how can I answer this? Lord, I don't know how to answer this. I know you love me. I don't know at times how I'm demonstrating that I love him, right? So he loves us even when we are unfaithful. He loves us Why? Because he's the great God. He understands all of your hearts. He knows your temptations. Man, if you got a gaming addiction, he knows it. If you got a drug addiction, he knows it. And despite all that garbage, he loves you. Despite the fact that you're overly overwhelmed by your testosterone and every girl here looks like a queen, it doesn't matter. He loves you, right? He loves you. Last week, I had the opportunity to take Donald and Matt to meet two gold medalists from the U.S. Olympic volleyball team. And it was amazing because Donald got his picture with them, Matt got his picture. If they haven't shown those pictures to you, ask them about it. But the issue is, it doesn't matter whether they're Olympic champions. Haley Washington's dad is a follower of Christ, and he's thrilled that she got a gold medal. But down deep, he would rather have her be able to answer this question that God asks, that Jesus, who died on the cross, asks, do you love me? And what did he say the answer was? You guys know the answer? What did Jesus say after he asked the question, do you love me? Do you love me? What's that? Feed my sheep. Who are the sheep in your life? Is it your high school friends? Is it your college friends? Is it your brother and sister? How do you feed them the love of Christ? How do you share the love of Christ? Sometimes we forget. Our lives are so busy. You have all these reasons. Your marketing professor makes you have to come up with an advertising campaign by next Tuesday. Crazy. Life is crazy. Wait till you are in a real marketing office and you have 8 hours to put together a campaign because there's big money in it. And that's how you keep your job. Do you love me? Do you? I would say to you that sometimes it's a whole lot easier. And like you heard, last Saturday on the 28th of August was our 28th wedding anniversary. But that question's asked a lot. Do you love me? How do you demonstrate that you love Christ? Feed his sheep. Do not be afraid of that. He is with you. He is always with you. He's asking you to make incredible sacrifices. I mean, he refers to it a lot. I mean, if you join the Army or the Marines, you're going to face hardship. Romans 12:12 is an amazing verse. It's scary as anything. But we want to only focus on the first part. Rejoice in hope. Right? Rejoice in our salvation. Rejoice in our hope of Christ. The second one is, at the very same time, persevere tribulation. And the final, be dedicated to prayer. So we heard earlier, if you're going to have effective prayer, you need to be obedient. If you're going to endure temptation, you've got to choose to have joy now. You have to choose to celebrate now, despite every struggle you're going through. But joy is a choice. This garbage of happiness is fake. I know your generation lists happiness up there with the top thing. Rejoicing is so much richer than happiness. Rejoicing is something that you control, not a bad thought or a good thought. It is your choice to rejoice in your relationship with Jesus Christ. All I can ask you to do is to love him. Everything else is up to you to answer the question. And that question is asked to you now. I know there's some people that think there's people here that still don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. I don't know. But if this is the moment for you to want to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, please talk to one of your professors. Please talk to your RAs or your RDs. Dr. Lytle, he'd love to walk you through the steps to having a relationship with Jesus Christ. He would love that. He would be honored. Do you love me? It's a simple question. It's a simple answer. But you have to choose. That's the greatest part about this relationship with Christ. We have to choose. He's just waiting for the answer to let us in. Be a part of that. Let me pray, and we'll go from there. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for every student here. I pray that you would bless them and protect them. Dear Lord, be with all the athletes as they go out. May you keep them from injury. May they demonstrate to others your love of them, that they might have courage to face difficult times. And dear Lord, those that are struggling right now because their friends or families have COVID, may you give them courage. May they show and demonstrate their love and kindness. May they remember that love starts with kindness, that they need to be kind before they can ever truly love. Guide us now, dear Lord. Be with those at home that are struggling, whether it's from abuse or addictions. Dear Lord, I believe that you can heal all of those things. Guide us now in Jesus' name. Amen. Just one reminder. Oh, they turned me off. All right. 11 to 12 in 224, 1 to 2 and 4:30, or join us for lunch at 12. God bless everybody.